There you go. That's Dr. Delbert Doppler. And his name's really fun. And I think it's really cool how they kind of related his name to science, like the Doppler effect. And just how he's kind of goofy. But it's really interesting because in many ways, he's kind of another father figure for Jim.
Right.
He's the one who convinces Jim's mom that Jim can come with him and go on this adventure to find Treasure Planet. And I don't know. I think it was just really cool with that. Because Dr. Doppler starts out as kind of like this nerdy guy who doesn't really talk to anyone. He lives in this super big house, but he doesn't really do much. And then he goes on this adventure and later was able to start a family. Oops, spoilers. So, just some other cast stuff on this. Martin Short voiced Ben. I don't really know what he's from. I think he's a really good actor. But the other thing that I found really interesting is Morph. So let's talk a little about Morph. He's a really cool character because Morph was basically taking the place of the parrot in Treasure Island, in that the place of a parrot, in that he mimics what you say, but he also mimics what you do and basically like who you are in a lot of ways. He's kind of like Ditto, like the Pokemon, but I think so much better because he just floats around and transforms into things, and it actually affects the story in some ways throughout the movie.
And I would say he's also a comical relief character, and not that the story needs much comical relief, but he is that character.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's one thing that is also really cool with Morph is he's kind of showing you that little glimpse into the good parts of John Silver. You can see that relationship between him and this little creature that he rescued, I think it says in the movie. But you can really see that start, and it can, I don't know, it just kind of foreshadows a little bit, which I thought was really cool. But Morph was actually voiced, in quotations. The sounds that he makes were made by Dane Davis, and he was actually the sound editor for The Matrix and won an award for that, so that's cool. Stuff is related. So now we're going to be talking about the world building, which world building is a super cool thing. Sometimes you can take it way too in depth, which I've done before, but I think they did just perfectly with this movie.
Yeah, because one of my, I wouldn't say pet peeves, but one thing that kind of bugs me is when movies think they have to over-explain things. Like, I think a good example of this is the original Star Wars trilogy with the new Star Wars trilogy. With the original, I like to think of the cantina scene where we kind of just come in and we see a bunch of different creatures and life forms and stuff like that. But we don't have anything explained to us. Like, and I think one of the things is, like, the bartender says, we don't serve your kind here, and he's talking to the droids. And that's a cool aspect that, like, not a lot of people think about, but there's no explaining of it. It's not like, we don't serve your kind here because something happened, I don't know. But something with the newer trilogy that they did was, like, when they're talking about how they put, like, a compressor on the hyperdrive of the Millennium Falcon. When I rewatched that, I just think it's kind of unnecessary, because it's almost like they're trying to explain, or they're trying to, like, enter the science side of sci-fi, which for me isn't really the point. I don't know if that's, like, a good example, but I don't remember what it's called, but there's this way of storytelling that is, like, especially with sci-fi, where you go into detail with one thing so that the audience can connect to something. The audience accepts everything else because they've accepted this one thing. So I think with Star Wars, it would be like the Force, where they kind of go into how the Force works and why it exists, and even in the prequels they say it's like midichlorians, but they're explaining that one thing so that the rest of the world makes sense, and the rest of the world, or the audience accepts the rest of the world. And so I think with Treasure Planet, I think they do an amazing job with this. I'm trying to think, maybe, like, I think the one thing that they explain well is the planet full of treasure, and it's not really sci-fi, but it's something that people can get and comprehend, and so they start to naturally just accept everything else that's going on. I kind of went the long way around of explaining it, but I just really enjoy when movies do that.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I think that's something that a lot of sci-fi can have problems with, and also maybe some fantasy as well, as when you go into too much explaining, And I've run into that because I've done some little bit of writing and fantasy and stuff. And you can really get way too deep into it. Like, where did this race come from? And why is this civilization the way that it is? And sometimes it can help, but sometimes you're just overcomplicating things for the viewer. And people don't want everything explained to them.
I was just going to say that. I think that it's important with the creator to understand that, but it's not necessarily important for the storyline for that to be included. It's like the iceberg effect. I learned this in like creative writing classes. The author is gonna understand and kind of know everything under the surface of the water, and it's just like this big glob of things, but you understand everything. But for the story and the purpose of the audience, you're really only showing the top part. And for the audience, that's all they need to get.
And going more into that world building a little bit, I think it's really cool how they did the spaceport and also that transition. I think they have a lot of cool transitions from one scene to the other.
Mm-hmm.
And how it just kind of zooms in on the moon and then spins a little bit, and then there's the spaceport. And they have all these different races of people, different like creatures and stuff, different languages being spoken. And yeah, you just like feel like this world is lived in, and you're just kind of stepping into it and trying to understand it as best as you can. So they did that really well. I almost didn't even mention it, but something that I love about this movie, even though I've never been super good at skating or snowboarding or surfing or any of those things, is Jim Hawkins' little like solar board thing that he rides on that he built. I feel like it kind of stands as this parallel to who he is. It's very free, can kind of go wherever it wants, and that's what he wants to do, is go wherever he wants. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Han Solo. So Jim Hawkins kind of reminds me a little bit of Han Solo. And just that he wants to go on all these adventures and take the risks, I guess. And he kind of does something really cool on his board in the beginning of the movie. But you guys have to watch it to find out. Go watch it if you haven't seen it. But yeah, I think that was really cool. Oh man, I was just thinking about deleted scenes and stuff. So there's this deleted scene from the movie of Jim, and it's kind of showing the goodness in him. And he's with this little kid and telling this little kid how to fix his board because his board breaks. And Jim is finally getting this moment to kind of be mature, I guess, and kind of be a father figure to someone else. And then this kid's father comes and helps this kid instead, and Jim's kind of left on his own. It's this really interesting scene that they did. Of course, it's not in the movie. You guys are probably like, what you talking about, Willis? But yeah, it was just like this really cool scene to show that. It's kind of like with that idea of giving people occupations and lives and things that they're doing. Like his mom's working at this inn. He's this kid, and he's kind of like a skater boy, basically, in a very sci-fi, like high-tech civilization.